Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a weekly political analysis show. We don't have any single major topic to talk about, but a couple of small things. Two major small things, and then over the last few weeks, and then we will go on with our day. So this will be a shorter episode, mostly because last week we had two. If you missed them, please go check them out. We had one on Monday and one on Thursday. So, at the end of the week before last, which I didn't catch until last week, and after I was already beginning to put this together, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard dropped some pretty scandalous information left over from the Biden administration, and actually from the Obama administration, that the DOJ is going to look into. I'm going to explain it briefly, and then I'll give you my thoughts. So Gabbard is saying there's irrefutable evidence that in December 2016, President Obama used his intelligence and national security team to fabricate a hoax that Trump's 2016 election win was aided in some way, shape, or form by Russia. Gabbard is going to declassify a 5-year report by Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee from 2020 that disagreed. They said that the election was not influenced, and then the Senate also looked into it in the same year and said that Russian disinformation did impact the 2016 election campaign. This isn't surprising because Russia has been doing this for a long time. They don't just meddle in Ukraine. They've been meddling in other democracies. So, for example, in the UK during the Brexit referendum, it is speculated but never proven that there were some Russian ties to get Britain to leave the EU because they believe the EU would be weaker without the UK and vice versa. For example, not to get into this too much, but Boris Johnson, who led the Leave campaign, to leave the EU in 2016, he dined with the son of a Russian oligarch after announcing his support for the Leave campaign. And also he gave that same person a life peerage to the House of Lords, or resigns. It will forever be a member of the UK's parliament. Very shady. And lastly, we know that Philip Hammond, who at the time was the UK's foreign secretary, he said that the only people who want the UK to leave the EU is Russia. So they've definitely done this before. There's no evidence to show that they wouldn't attack other countries as well in the future, including our own elections. As far as I know, there has never been any conclusion that they influenced the 2024 election. Okay, so what am I saying here? Russia has long been suspected in meddling in democratic elections, as I said, and here's why. Russia is trying to influence elections in certain directions because they believe certain people in office would benefit them. Now, why did they pick Trump? I don't know. That's up to speculation. I assume they saw an ally in Donald Trump in some way, shape, or form, and maybe they thought they could play him better than Hillary Clinton, maybe not. That really depends on your political views. Does this mean that Trump was going to win without Russian interference? I would probably say yes. I mean, the Senate concluded that, especially with like the WikiLeaks and Cambridge Analytica and all that Russia flooded social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram with fake information about Hillary Clinton. Now, it's hard to say if that didn't end up happening. Would Hillary have still won the election? I'm going to probably say no. And if you're interested, I can certainly explain another time, but I'm not going to get into that here. So you might be wondering, why is Gabbard opening this up now? That was 8 years ago. So this is very convenient, and I said last week that the administration was going to try to distract us, and this is likely what's happening here. I said that Trump was going to fire Powell, which would be a better distraction method in my opinion, and it seems that Trump for once took the less extreme option, which doesn't mean he won't fire Powell in the future, but who knows. Is this actually going to go anywhere? Is this distraction actually going to work? Probably not. Unless they actually arrest Barack Obama and put him in handcuffs, then I don't see that happening. And here's the thing. The Supreme Court also ruled last year the same immunity they gave Donald Trump, they also gave Barack Obama. So he was acting in his capacity as President of the United States. And unless they can get the Supreme Court to reverse their own decision that they only just made a year ago, then if it goes to the courts, Obama's going to plead immunity. Moving on, we have two more topics. Congress has been in turmoil the last 2 weeks, and it's been quite funny to watch. There are several rebels trying to, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, are trying to get the Epstein files released. And I know I said I wouldn't talk about this again. We'll just focus on the congressional dynamics here. And they want to subpoena the Department of Justice for the records. They've already subpoenaed it for Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton's involvement in the files, which is stupid, and I'll explain in a moment. This means that there would have to be testimony from where a witness would be presented at Congress. And the reason why it's stupid to subpoena Bill and Hillary's is because if they just released all the documents, there would be no need to subpoena anybody. If they were just released, then that would be the end of it. That would be everything. At the same time, Johnson has a razor-thin majority, and he can only lose a few votes every time something goes to the floor. He has a majority, but he really doesn't. He has a minority. He's running a minority government that's pieced together vote by vote. If Johnson caves and allows the House to further investigate this, especially release the files, then I think Trump is going to turn on him. I have no doubt about that. And if Johnson refuses and he sides with the president, then there are going to be rebels like Marjorie Taylor Greene and his name is escaping me right now, but he's from Kentucky, and I would imagine if they can organize themselves a little bit better, they could bring him down. And that's exactly what happened to McCarthy 2 years ago, and I haven't heard anything in the media about this, not even speculation, so I assume this isn't being considered at the moment. So in order to avoid such a vote, what happened? Well, the Speaker shut down the House of Representatives. So the House will not be back until Labor Day, which is 5 weeks away. All the votes that they were going to do, I don't even know what they were. They canceled them or they postponed them. They're not going to do it until after summer. This is going to cause a lot of problems, and this whole scandal. And what I mean is Republicans really do not want to be seen as covering up a known sex abuser, especially of children. It is politically suicidal. And at the same time, crossing Trump is also politically suicidal. So that leaves them between the rock and the hard place. I would say the hard place being in Trump's ire, and the rock being protecting Jeffrey Epstein. That's basically what they're doing. One of two things has to cave here. Either it has to be acceptable to cover up a sex abuse scandal, or it has to be acceptable to oppose the president. Option number one, that's never going to happen. So the only thing that can give here is number two, and that means that there just needs to be enough rebels to bring, along with the Democrats, to bring the files to force the president to release them. And it would have to be, I'm not exactly sure the legal dynamics here, but it would have to be an overwhelming consensus, because President Trump would absolutely veto this, which would be stupid, but he's going to veto it. And that would mean that they would need to override the veto. And that would require a vast majority of Republicans. In the House, it would require like 80 of them, and in the Senate, it would be about 20. So it would be a lot. So now we're going to have to see if there's going to be any momentum here. I don't know. Congress is going home for 5 weeks, and that's certainly going to add an interesting dynamic. Maybe this could fizzle out. Maybe it'll only gain momentum when Congress returns. Who knows? We'll see when we get there. According to CNN, Johnson and his leadership team are hoping that the courts are going to resolve this in the month of August while they're gone. That's next month. And maybe this will be the end. And since Democrats are so invested in this issue, they believe that continuing to handle it is playing into their hands, and I agree. This is probably the best course of action to shut down the House. However, it can only work for so long. And when Congress returns, they need to pass some sort of funding measure to extend the government funding until presumably December. That's probably what they're going to do. And they only barely passed it back in March. So Congress is going to be out of the picture, and they're going to have a lot to do when they get back. And lastly, President Trump is off to Scotland. He should be coming home either today or tomorrow. And this is his first. His business is opening a new golf course, and more importantly for us, there will be trade talks between UK PM Starmer and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. And this comes after threats of 30% tariffs on the EU by August 1st, which is a couple of days away. And many in the press seem to have forgotten about this. They only seem to be focusing on the fact that Trump is running away from the Epstein news. I just pulled this up right on my phone as we were speaking. They've reached a trade deal according to the Wall Street Journal. So in this article here, it says President Trump has reached a trade agreement on Sunday with the European Union, avoiding a damaging trade war with the U.S. largest trading bloc, and marked his biggest deal so far in his attempt to remake the global trading system. So according to the Wall Street Journal, there will be 15% baseline tariffs on the EU goods, and the EU will agree to buy $750 billion of energy products from the U.S., and they will invest in an additional $600 billion in the U.S. as well. And President Trump said, "I think it's going to be great for both parties," following a face-to-face talks with Sunday with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Trump's golf court in Thornbury, Scotland. So that is good news. 15% tariffs is still higher than what is going on right now. Right now it's 10%, and I really don't understand. Like this isn't really that great. At least I guess they're going to invest in our economy, so that's nice. But Trump is talking about raising the baseline tariff to 15% anyway. So if I was the EU, I would say, you're just giving us what everybody else is getting, and then you're asking us to give you even more. So, no, I don't think they should have agreed to this. The only reason they probably did is because they didn't want 30% tariffs. And Europe is an ally, and as I said, and as I'll explain, I don't think picking fights with them is the best idea. But that kind of throws away a lot of my script here. But the president had said he worked diligently with Europe. He's worked very hard with them. There's things that they need to work on. And I think that this trade deal is, I would say, is good, but certainly not great. And the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was a lot closer to former President Biden than to Trump. And I think that could make the relationship a lot harder between the two of them. And I assume for Trump, that would build a lot of resentment on his behalf. And here's my thing about the whole trade dispute. And yes, it is true that we import more from Europe. We export about $253 billion worth of goods, which is a lot of money. That's the trade deficit. Except here's how I think about it. First of all, a lot of our money that they get from us when we buy our things goes into our financial sector. So that would be like the banks and Wall Street. The EU says they have a 148 billion euro trade deficit on services, and that's about $174 billion as of this recording. And not only that, we have the status as the world's largest reserve currency. So if you take the 235 and minus the 174, the only thing we're losing is $61 billion. And in my opinion, $61 billion is absolutely worth being the world's reserve currency, as opposed to the euro. Because in my opinion, the only currency that could possibly replace the dollar would be the euro, and the euro's got a lot of issues with it because the euro is not one country like the dollar is. The euro is a bunch of other countries and could very easily destabilize if there was a problem there. So investors are going to trust the dollar more than the euro. And being the world's reserve currency allows us to run huge deficits every single year. And if we were not, then we would have a lot of other issues, and we would probably have a debt crisis by now. And I would say that has given us tremendous leverage, and I know pretty much every economist and politician would agree. So if you ask me, we're about even with Europe, except on the military front, because I think NATO should be spending more on their own defense. By NATO, I mean our non-American NATO allies. They should be spending more on defense, which they have committed to doing, and that will take time to ramp up. And picking a fight with Europe is not really a good idea because of we have such close military ties. Most of their economies are not doing very well. They're still recovering from high inflation and potential recession. Even the largest economies like France and Germany are struggling, particularly France in particular. They have an economic and political problem at home. So I don't think they're going to be able to contribute much more. And the UK is not doing spectacular either, facing rising inflation and lower economic growth than anticipated. And even though they're not a member of the EU anymore, they're still an important part of our European bloc. Okay, so that is it for this episode. Thank you for your time and listening. As always, you will hear from me later this week. I have 2 major announcements to make later this week. I'm not ready to do those today, but you will definitely hear from me again. It'll be just a couple of minutes. I hope you can listen. If not, I will probably repeat those announcements in the next episode. But if you want to hear it a little bit early, please feel free to tune in later this week. That will probably come out on Wednesday, maybe Thursday. I have not yet decided. You will definitely hear from me before the close of business on Friday. It won't be a full episode like last week, as I said, but it will be important. Our next full episode will be on Monday, August 4th. Bye-bye.